Welcome to the Fintech Times News and Views podcast. Established in 2016, the Fintech Times is a global multimedia news outlet centered around the world's first leading fintech newspaper. We report on the latest and brightest ideas from the fintech world. Follow the conversation using hashtag TFD News and Views and follow us at the Fintech Times.
Hello and welcome back to the Fintech Times News and Views podcast brought to you by Vanta. Vanta helps you save time, money, and build customer trust, all by centralizing program requirements and evidence collections for frameworks like DORA. If you want to manage risk and prove security, then head to vanta.com/fintech times to learn more. And with that, me and Francis are back once again this week. And I think it's fair to say it's been a very busy week. We've had loads of news to get through and choose from. You know, what have you been thinking, Francis? Are you feeling the same? Busy week?
Yeah, considering that it's, we've got the long weekend ahead of us here in the UK, I don't know why I sort of had the impression that things would probably be quite slow, but no, you're right, it's been non-stop, a lot of European news this week. It tends to always be that way, that we have one sort of region that really decides that this week is going to be the week that everything is announced, and this week it's definitely Europe. But no, it's been a good week, and I'm looking forward to the conversation today. How about you?
Yeah, exactly the same. I feel the same, actually. It's maybe it's because we've got Easter weekend coming up. Everyone's like, right, we need to get our news out before then, before everyone leaves the offices. They're going to take some time off. They're trying to squeeze all the news out, especially in Europe. But with that, obviously, we have had a lot of news to choose from. What story are you delving into today?
So today I wanted to talk about the use of sort of crypto payments, and specifically looking at stable coins and how they can be used in Mexico, following a new partnership announced between ChippyPay and the Starknet Foundation.
Fantastic. And I'm going to be talking about the UK's new plans that is unveiled to invest £121 million in quantum technology. So what do you want to do? Do you want to go first this week?
Yeah, I'll go first. I don't mind. So yeah, as I mentioned, the new collaboration is between the Mexican-based pre-funded stablecoin wallet ChippyPay and the Starknet Foundation, a high-performance Layer 2 scaling solution that brings security, decentralization, and ultra-low transaction fees to Ethereum. So the new collaboration will see ChippyPay bridge the gap between traditional finance and the Web3 ecosystem for consumers and merchants, and power payments for over 50 million Mexican citizens. Its current offering involves providing an accessible alternative to traditional banking for small firms in Mexico and Latin America, which face payment processing fees between 3 and 5% per transaction. So, in contrast, ChippyPay facilitates transactions with negligible fees and faster settlements, and as a result, merchants using ChippyPay can process transactions without delays, and the platform allows payments via QR codes, NFC, and direct transfers. The underlying crypto technology is abstracted away, and most users don't even realize they're using crypto. This is in large part due to the app's lack of crypto jargon. Additionally, merchants receive funds in fiat currency, making onboarding for first-time users extremely simple. Users can also enjoy an experience without complex wallet management, and it also eliminates gas fees and ensures smooth payments. And as a result, ChippyPay acts as a consumer tool and crypto rails solution for banks and event providers, disrupting the monopoly of large processors. So the main reason I wanted to talk to you about this today is because of this idea of sort of hiding away the crypto technology. Most of the time, I think over the last few years, I would say, most of the time firms use this sort of technology. They almost like to show it off as if a way of saying, look, we're digitally savvy, we're tech savvy, we're up to date with the latest sort of innovations. And I think a lot of the time this can sort of be a two-sided coin. In the one sense, those who are extremely into the crypto and sort of the latest developments around it, they get very excited about that, and they think, oh, this is another platform that, is using something I'm interested in. But then it can have the opposite effect, which is somebody goes, oh, this is just something I don't understand, therefore I'm not going to go near it. So the idea of, the way that I see it at least, is very similar to sort of the way that embedded finance is actually used in the UK, in the sense that a lot of the time people aren't actually aware that they're using it, but they are. But because it isn't given this label that, this is embedded finance, this is what you're using, people just don't really realize it, so they're almost happy to continue using it. And I think this is kind of why I like this article, is just this idea that is the future of crypto payments, not crypto as an investment, but crypto payments. Is it going to be going down this stealth route where consumers don't need to understand how the tech is used or even know that it's being used? It just is in the background.
I think that's a really good question. And something we always talk about on the podcast is about how crypto it's got this stigma around it in many cases, where for most people, it's, as you said, something they think about invest in. They see this volatile market, they can make a lot of money. But when it actually comes to sort of the technology behind crypto and blockchain, people are, first of all, less knowledgeable about how it works. They don't necessarily understand it. And that maybe leads to a lack of customer trust. People think, well, I don't know how this actually works. And my understanding of crypto is this very volatile market. So I don't want to, send my money through using crypto rails, because that could be seen as an untrustworthy way you could potentially lose your money, when that isn't necessarily the case. And I really like the story, because I think it really shows how it can be used in a different way. And maybe this is the future, as you said, is kind of abstracting away this underlying crypto technology and just saying, this is a technology that you can use to send money simply and easily. It'll be cheaper than traditional payment rails. And for that reason, people are going to adopt it. And I think in this case, in Mexico, it's going to be hugely beneficial to the unbanked. It'll be really interesting to see how this technology grows in the future, not only in Mexico, but beyond. But yeah, I think it's a really good, interesting bit of news. And I think it's a really good example of how crypto payment rails can be useful without the crypto being the front and center. People put fiat currency in, they get fiat currency out, and that in that sense is very good. And yeah, overall, I think it's a very interesting story. And I also like the fact that you had to say Chippy Pay about 20 times in 2 minutes. I really enjoyed that.
It is a great company name, let's be honest. But yeah, no, I think you're absolutely right. I think it is good to see this new sort of payment avenue, really, and the way it's communicated as well to customers. I mean, there is also the argument of, by hiding it away, is that going to sort of hinder customer trust, because you're not sort of being completely open with them, and you're not sort of being totally transparent. And I think obviously that is a big thing that we've seen in the industry, and that is this huge argument about customer trust, is that when a customer doesn't understand what is happening and why it's happening, then it's very easy for them to decide, actually, I don't want to be using this organization anymore. So I think there is a fine line in the sense of, well, to be honest, I say that I think it really does sort of go both ways. I think on the one hand, you could say that having it in the background and then maybe eventually saying, oh, by the way, you've been using crypto this whole time, might be the way to go forward about it. Or maybe it's just the simply saying, we can offer you these cheaper payment transfers, and then if you ask the question as to why, they'll say it, but it's not something up front and center. But no, I think there is definitely sort of an interesting dynamic to using crypto in this way, and I think you're right. It'll be interesting to see how it develops in this sort of stealth infrastructure background type of manner, rather than being the selling point, which I think to this point it really has been. But yeah, no, I think that's a good point to move on to your article. So why don't we do that?
Yeah, absolutely. And my article is taking a bit of a move away, and we're looking at quantum technology. And that's because on Monday this week, the 14th of April, the UK government unveiled plans to invest £121 million in quantum technology as part of its plans to crack down on crime, fraud, and money laundering, amongst other things. So basically, to break it down, in a release, the UK government explained that it believes that developing and rolling out quantum can help bring a range of benefits to working people, including promises like improving healthcare systems and boosting energy efficiency in the power grid, alongside bolstering its world-leading research programs in the UK. And essentially, the government says that by supporting efforts to tackle fraud and money laundering, working people are going to benefit by putting more money in their pockets and driving economic growth through efforts that could save the economy billions. Now, obviously, at the Fintech Times, we're always looking at the finance side of things. in our spotlight this week, we explored how quantum technology is also being leveraged by HSBC, where quantum specialists have been working alongside government-backed partners like the National Quantum Computing Centre to find ways of using quantum to identify the indicators of anti-money laundering. Now, the government says that this project proves that alongside other government support, researchers can harness quantum technology to benefit working people nationwide, and in this case, protecting their bank accounts from would-be fraudsters. Now, the reason I wanted to bring this to the podcast is because on the face of it, I think the announcement seems very impressive. Obviously, the government's made some very big promises. It's saying, it's going to potentially improve energy efficiency. It's going to crack down on fraud. It could save the economy billions. It can drive economic growth. And yet, I wonder if it could prove to be a bit of a failure, maybe, just because while on the face of it, £121 million does seem like a lot, when you actually compare it to what other countries are investing in quantum technology, it actually just seems like a bit of a drop in the ocean. So to put it into context, I found that elsewhere in Europe, Germany plans to invest around $3 billion by 2026. France has pledged nearly $2 billion and aims to train 5,000 quantum-ready engineers and create 30,000 jobs. And in the US, the National Quantum Initiative Act has authorized $1.2 billion in funding over the next 5 years for quantum computing research and development. Meanwhile, China is like way out in front. I think the estimates are putting that around 15 billion in quantum technology. And I feel like with the plans that the UK has revealed so far, it doesn't seem massively specific. Obviously, there aren't a lot of key plans. They're not like numbers. They're not trying to create a certain amount of jobs. They're not trying to create a certain amount of economic development. And obviously, quantum technology is still very much in its infancy. We're not really seeing it commercially in use yet. And for that reason, I wanted to really ask you what your take on the news was. Do you think this is still a very positive investment? Is it still, a very good start for getting the UK on track for quantum computing? Or do you kind of agree with my point of view, which is that maybe the UK is at risk of falling behind by investing such a smaller amount compared to some other European and world leaders across the globe?
That is an incredibly interesting point. I think this idea of comparing the UK's attitude to, other sort of leaders across the globe, sort of for sort of innovative countries, sort of these big sort of development hubs. And I don't know, for me, quantum technology is always, I know that when we talk about blockchain and crypto on the podcast, Polly always says that it's something that, despite working at the Fintech Times for years now, is something that she still can't quite grasp. And for me, that's quantum technology. It always feels like it's something that I'm about to understand and then just don't. But I almost feel like I don't need to understand the ins and outs of it here. I think the important thing is that the government is working on a way of making, or combating fraud in a new way, I should say, because the amount of times that we see these reports coming across our desks sort of saying fraudsters are adapting this way to steal more money, or they're now doing this, or they're doing that. The amount of fraud and the amount of sort of cybercrime that's taking place, and that, the different methods that they're adopting, I don't think there's really any reason that anyone could complain about the government sort of saying, right, we're going to put money into a new initiative that will help stop that, in a way that, again, while I don't totally understand quantum technology, it has been successful in its use so far and the development of it. But it's about seeing how far it can sort of be taken and sort of, putting money into it so that it can reach its full potential. And I think the government sort of saying, we're going to put 121 million, like you say, actually, comparing it to other countries, it really isn't that much. Like, it's a tenth of what, I think it was France, you said, 1.2 billion. But I think something that's important to note is that this 121 million is the funding over just this year. Whereas I have a feeling, I mean, I could be completely wrong, but I feel like these other countries that are investing more are probably saying, by 2030, by 2028, or whatever it might be, that they're going to achieve this much. So it is over a bigger time span. It still is more money, but by saying, we're putting 121 million into it over this year, it sort of shows that it's an immediate thing that the government is wanting to work and improve on. And again, it feels, to me, it gives an impression that it's this immediate development to combat fraud, which is obviously going to continue to grow over the rest of 2025 and beyond. Fraudsters aren't going to stop trying to disrupt society just because some new technologies are being made and some new sort of cyber defenses are being created. They are going to continue. So I think the government needs to up its development in defenses as well. But I think overall it is a positive investment. I mean, it needs to start somewhere. Admittedly, comparing it to the other countries, like you say, it doesn't necessarily put it in the best light. However, I would then sort of bring it back to that point of this is only over the next year, and perhaps after this year, based on the developments that we see, we might see a 20-fold. We might see a sort of a 2 billion investment over the next in 2026 for the next few years or something like that. So I in my head, I'm seeing this as sort of a starting point, and in my head, that is a good thing.
Yeah, I completely get your point. I think you're spot on when you say some of these other countries, they have plans to invest. So Germany was by 2026. France is, it didn't specify from what I saw. The US is investing 1.2 billion over the next 5 years. There's very much people have longer plans, but I feel like one of the points, while the UK has committed it for the coming year, it's saying we're going to invest in these areas in the next year. There hasn't really been that longer term strategy yet, and I wonder if that could be a detriment to what the UK is doing. Like you said, they might next year come out and say, based on the development that we've seen in the past year, we've now decided to invest this much more and we've created this longer term plan. But for the time being, it still feels like the UK is lagging behind a little bit when it comes to quantum technology. And I think it's important to remember that quantum technology isn't something that we're actually utilizing yet. We're still sort of researching it and developing it and developing strategies to see these eventually big promises that the government is talking about. And I think it ties in quite nicely with the comment we got from David Sewell, who's the CTO at the digital transformation consulting firm Synchron. And he basically said that research and development in quantum computing is accelerating with growing investment based on the potential benefits of it to industries like financial services. However, the technology is still not accessible, usable, or economically viable for commercial use. And I feel like with that being the case, I feel we need to see a much longer term plan for quantum computing if the UK is going to actually advance its own position and be able to compete with other global leaders. But with that, I think we've wrapped that up very nicely. And it's always good to have a couple of opposing points of view when we look at a news story. But why don't we move on to our final segment, which is what I learned this week. So each week, so much news and insights crosses our desks, and we like to pick out something a little bit extra to share with our listeners. So Francis, what have you learned this week?
So this week I learned that Molly, the European payment platform, has enabled Tap to Pay on iPhone for its Irish customers, enabling businesses of all sizes to accept contactless payments via its app.
Perfect. One of the ones that caught my eye came from MoneyPoint, which is Nigeria's leading business payment and banking services platform. And it has announced the launch of MoneyWorld, which is a new remittance and digital financial services solution specifically to meet the fragmented, underserved needs of the UK's African diaspora. And with that comes or brings us to the end of this week's podcast. So, Francis, thank you very much for joining me this week, and I'll hopefully see you on the next one.
See you next week.
Thanks for listening to the Fintech Times News and Views podcast. Don't miss next week's episode and continue the conversation using #TFT News and Views and follow us at the Fintech Times.